So thank you, Blake, for your wonderful talk. I don't know if there'll be time for questions because there's a lot I want to say before. First, I want to talk a little bit about sitting form and other forms. So in Zen, in formal Zen practice, we're very intentional. When we come into the room, and I know I do this at home when I'm going to sit at home, we sort of set our intention. We do a bow. Many of us, before we eat, we do a little bow. It's like intentional. Okay, now this is what I'm going to do. And intentional, it's like when you go to a really fine restaurant, and not a pretentious restaurant, but a genuinely fine restaurant. And you know, the way they place the silverware, the way they put down a cup or a plate, it's not pretentious, it's not special, but it's very intentional. It's really nice, you know, when we're intentional. So when we sit, when we do sitting practice, we're intentional. And there's some things attached to that. We're always told not to move. And there's several aspects to that. One is you never scratch an itch, because no one ever died of an itch. And when you have an itch and you don't scratch it, that's a fantastic thing. That's a fantastic thing because you learn this itch does not control me. You know, usually we're just controlled by our itches. And that's, as well as being concrete, it's also a metaphor, right? We're controlled by our itches and you don't have to scratch it. You know, Blake was talking about how people often start meditating because they want to get rid of anxiety. Well, what happens as you practice is you don't need to get rid of anxiety. It can walk in, you can offer a tea, and it can sit in a corner, and it doesn't have to control you. There's nothing wrong with anxiety. It's just anxiety. There's nothing wrong with grief. There's nothing wrong with anger. There's nothing wrong with happiness. No one ever wants to get rid of those, right? There's nothing wrong with anything that comes up in our mind or our feeling or our body, but it doesn't have to control us. So that's a wonderful thing. And we manifest it when we're sitting. We manifest it when we're sitting, that we're not being controlled by a little desire of an itch, say. And then, of course, sometimes our bodies hurt and we really have to do something about it. There's two things that happen. One is lactic acid buildup, which is that burning pain you get. And that, if you can sit through that, that's fine, but not everybody can. As soon as you get up, it goes away. Then there's things, sometimes people have a physical condition where, like, you realize that you're actually going to hurt yourself. That when you get up, there's going to be a problem. Like maybe you're spraining your ankle, or maybe maybe you're doing something to your back, and you really have to change your posture. So there are some schools, especially Japanese schools, where you're not allowed to move at all. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter what's going on. You have to sit there, and you cannot move. That's it. And then in Korea, actually, the monastic practice is that if you're sitting and you realize that you have to change your posture, you can do it quietly. But people who have done this, like at home, obviously when you practice and you need to change your posture, you do it quietly, and you'll notice that it usually doesn't work. Because there's an underlying thing going on there, an underlying muscle tension that you're not relieving by simply taking, instead of having your left leg on top of your right leg on top of your left, or whatever it is. And so my teacher, I think he devised it, but maybe other people do it too, this form where when we really have to change our posture, we stand up first. And then that relieves the tension. That relieves whatever is going on. And then when we're ready to sit down, we sit down again. So that's the way we recommend doing it, because it works better. If you just simply go like that, it doesn't work that well. And also it's more intentional, because you stand up, oh, I'm intending this. It's not just I'm doing it, but it's like I'm intending this. There's this focus to it. So And that's what I wanted to say about sitting posture, and also about anxiety and its relatives. You know, you don't have to get rid of it. It's fine. Just don't let it control you. You know, that's all. And then there's also, Blake referred to these weeble wobbles. Yeah. See, my son's too young. We didn't have weeble wobbles. But my brother, who's very old, like me, he had something called a Joe Palooka doll, which was this, yeah, it was a blow-up thing, you know, you put, and it had a heavy, like some kind of like little balls or something on the bottom, a heavy weight on the bottom, and you knocked it over, it came back. So you could punch it and it came back. That's what it was. Joe Palooka was this comic figure. Some of us are old enough to know. And in Northeast Asia, it's called the Bodhidharma doll, and it's thousands of years old. And so the Bodhidharma, so my teacher used to talk about a Bodhidharma doll. And the same thing, except I think it was made out of wood. And it had a heavy bottom, and then you'd knock it over and come back, knock it over, come back. So, yeah. Great. And I think that's all I wanted to say. And so now I'll ask, are there any questions? Yes. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so Blake mentioned that you know, koan practice is good for the practice of, okay, now what do you do? So yeah, you back
Thank you. I
up.
want to say something about that. Yeah.
And you know, and I have to say, no one has ever said to me, give me one word or I'm going to kill this cat. Never has anyone said that to me. Nobody's walked up to me ever and said, does a dog have Buddha nature? So I don't really get how, I mean, and I do the koan practice, but how that helps me once I leave, I mean, I've got some vague,
Okay.
but anyway.
So you raised 2 points, actually. And the first one is something that I did want to mention, and that's, how do you know what to do? And so this is a story that many of you have heard before. A long time ago, a young man named Sihoi Liao, who later became a monk in our school and then a great Zen master, and died suddenly at the age of 52 of a heart attack while giving an interview to a 12-year-old girl in Hong Kong. But when he was still layperson Sihoi Liao, he wrote a postcard to Zen Master Sungsan, and he said, what is the fast road to Zen? And Zen Master Sungsan replied, not for me. So this notion of ego, this notion of I, this notion of self that we're always trying to protect, that's what gets us in the way of acting effectively. And when we can drop that, and when we can really be with the person or in the situation without all this defensive stuff, we can really, then we can have a chance to see clearly. And if our actions are not for me, for you, if we can have that mind, then our actions have a chance of being helpful. Now, this does not mean, oh yes, please beat me up, that's fine. That's not what it means, because that's hurting the person as well as you, right? They're having a moral injury. So it's not like you roll over and let people do whatever they want to you. It's more like, what is the heart of this situation? What is what is really going on in this situation? Put aside my self-interest, my shallow self-interest, put that aside. What is the heart of the situation? Every parent knows this. Your kid cries in the middle of the night, you get up and you comfort them. Maybe you change their diaper, maybe you feed them, maybe you know, whatever they need, maybe you rock them back to sleep. Every parent knows this. Everyone knows this. Everyone has had this experience of responding without a moment's thought. And that mind is the mind that tells us how to function. And that mind also arises through practice. Because as we practice, one of the things that happens is we inspect this concept of I that keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And we become really intimately familiar with its lack of substance. It becomes very clear to us. No one has to tell us. You know, if I say your self has no substance, that doesn't mean anything. But if you see it for yourself as it comes up and comes up and comes up, your small self, there's this big self, which is we all share in, but this small self, we begin to see that, you know, we really make it up and it has no substance. So that's where actions come from. And now you asked about koan practice. And what koan practice helps us do, well, it helps us with a lot. Like one thing in the situation where you come in and the teacher asks you a question, like, does a dog have Buddha nature? And you can't figure out an answer, and then you feel like you're really stupid, and, you know, the teacher doesn't like you, and all this stuff comes up in your mind, and, you know, what happened? I thought I was like this, you know, really smart person, and blah, 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 and, you know, and it's great because it's happening in a situation of no consequence. And this keeps happening, keeps happening, keeps happening. And after a while, you see this is really useless. You know, why bother with this? Just do the work. Don't have all these judgments and fears and, you know, self-image stuff. Don't worry about it. Just do the work, you know. So that's one thing that happens in koan practice, is we become less distracted by our desire to look good to other people and to ourselves. And, you know, a lot of things associated with that, like become less attached to achieving a goal. I have to answer this koan, you know. We become less attached to that. This notion of achieving a goal and just, okay, what's now? We're open to trying things. You don't have to be assured that it's correct. Just try it. You know, maybe the teacher will approve, maybe they won't, but just try it, you know. So all these things happen, you know, in our sort of psychology that are helpful. But the main thing that happens is the kind of word traps and social traps that we are trained to fall into from the minute we begin to talk, that those things begin to follow it, because the minute you fall into one of those traps, you're not going to answer the koan correctly. So someone says, you know, the story is a monk asked great Zen Master Chao Cho, who was Zhaozhou, I guess he was like 8th century China, you know, does a dog have Buddha nature? And Zhaozhou says, mu, which means no or has not. Contemporary Chinese it's wu, but back then it was mu. And this is like a very, very famous koan. And then the teacher will ask, well, does a dog have Buddha nature? And if you say yes, you'll be wrong. I'm not giving anything away here. And if you say no, you'll be wrong. And if you say yes and no, you'll be wrong. And if you say not yes and not no, you'll be wrong. This is called the tetralemma. And so, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't say yes, I can't say no, I can't say, you know, right? And you're trapped. So how do you get out of that trap? And we're in this kind of situation all the time, where these, you know, social situations especially, where something is set up and we, you know, we have a very limited notion of our options. And we're trapped by that limited notion. And then with koan practice, you realize, wait a minute, I can just step out of the trap. I don't have to be trapped. I can, you know, it's like those martial arts where instead of attacking somebody, you just move and then boom, they fall on their face. It's like that. So, yeah, so koan practice is really, really wonderful. And I highly recommend it. And it's good exactly, you know, in part, exactly for this thing of sidestepping and not getting trapped in what everyone else is being trapped in, and really being able to see a way forward. And when you do that, it happens in your own life. I mean, many times in my life. Like maybe, you know, I'm on some kind of committee and they have to write some kind of document, and they're writing this document, and everybody has this idea of like what they want to say because they want people to, you know, and they start getting all complicated and stuff like that, and everyone's like trapped in their own idea of, you know, everything like that. And then if you can step in and say, well, wait a minute, you know, here's the point. Let's get rid of all the other stuff. Here's the point, and then you're like that. Koan practice lets you do that. Koan practice lets you, you know, when your friends are fighting, instead of taking sides, or instead of trying to mediate, Koan practice helps you get, you know, to the thing that's at the heart. That's at the heart of the situation. So, I really recommend Koan practice. Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to let Liz be the host so people online can hang out together.